The demolition was finished by 4:30, just as Miguel had promised. Where the pool had been that morning, there was now a neat rectangular hole filled with gravel and waiting for Monday's dirt delivery. The concrete rubble had been hauled away, the equipment loaded back onto trucks, and the worksite cleaned with the efficiency of professionals who'd done this hundreds of times before. Marcus stood in his backyard as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, surveying the empty space where 3 years of memories had been. The hole looked smaller than he'd expected, not the gaping wound in the earth he'd imagined, but just an absence waiting to be filled with something new. "Looks good," Emma said, joining him on the back deck. She'd spent the afternoon in her room, emerging only when the noise stopped. "Weird, but good." "What feels weird about it?" "It's like ... You know how when you lose a tooth, your tongue keeps going to that spot? The yard feels like that, like something's missing, but maybe that's okay." Marcus smiled. "That's a pretty good analogy. I have my moments." Emma sat down on the deck steps, pulling her knees up to her chest. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you worried about Mrs. Whitfield?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "Worried how?" "I saw her at her window when the crew was leaving. She was on the phone again, and she looked ... I don't know. Like she was planning something." Marcus had seen Karen at the window too, though he'd tried not to think about it. The image of her silhouette behind the glass, phone pressed to her ear, had been nagging at him for the past hour. "I think Mrs. Whitfield is probably done causing problems," he said, though he wasn't entirely convinced of it himself. "She made her point. It didn't work out, and now she'll move on to something else." Maybe Emma didn't sound convinced either, or maybe she's the type of person who doesn't give up. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number wasn't in his contacts, but the area code was local. "Hello, Mr. Chen. This is Detective Lisa Mora with the Phoenix Police Department. I was wondering if I could speak with you about some questions that have come to our attention regarding your property." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Questions? About my property? We've received a report concerning possible irregularities in your recent pool removal. I'd like to schedule a time to meet with you, preferably in the next day or two." Emma was watching him with growing alarm. Clearly picking up on his tone, Marcus forced his voice to remain calm. "What kind of irregularities?" "I'd prefer to discuss that in person, if you don't mind. Would tomorrow morning work for you?" Yes, I suppose so. Can you tell me what this is about?" 10 o'clock at your residence?" "Detective Mora, I really need to know." 10 o'clock. "Tomorrow, Mr. Chen." "Thank you." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, his mind racing through every possible scenario, each one worse than the last. Dad, Emma's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Dad, what's wrong? I don't know." And that was the truth. Marcus genuinely had no idea what kind of irregularities could possibly be associated with removing a pool from his own property. "The police want to talk to me tomorrow about the pool." "I think so." Emma stood up, her face pale. "Is this because of Mrs. Whitfield?" Marcus looked toward Karen's house, where lights were beginning to come on in the evening dusk. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll figure it out." That night, Marcus barely slept. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind cycling through every interaction he'd had with city officials, every piece of paperwork he'd signed, every conversation with the pool installation company 3 years ago. Had he missed something? Was there some requirement he'd overlooked, some regulation he'd unknowingly violated? By the time Detective Mora arrived the next morning, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with prematurely gray hair and the kind of direct manner that suggested she'd seen everything, Marcus had worked himself into a state of barely controlled panic. "Mr. Chen," she said, shaking his hand on the front porch. "Thank you for making time to speak with me, of course. Please, come in." They settled in the living room, Emma having tactfully disappeared upstairs when the detective arrived. Mora pulled out a small notebook and pen, her movements precise and professional. "I understand you recently had a swimming pool removed from your backyard. Yes, yesterday? The demolition was completed around 4:30. And what prompted this decision?" Marcus felt like he was walking through a minefield. "Financial reasons, primarily. I couldn't afford the maintenance costs anymore." "I see. And the pool was how old?" 3 years. "We had it installed in 2022. Mora made a note. "Who handled the installation?" "A company called Desert Oasis Pools. They're based in Scottsdale." Are you still in contact with them? Not really. They handled the initial installation and warranty work, but after that, Marcus shrugged. We maintained it ourselves. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you about the circumstances of your wife's death. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stared at Detective Mora, certain he'd misheard her. I'm sorry, what? Your wife, Sarah Chen. She passed away 18 months ago. I'd like to know more about the circumstances. Marcus felt the room spinning slightly. What does my wife's death have to do with the pool removal? I'm not at liberty to discuss all the details of our investigation at this time, but I can tell you that we've received information suggesting there may be more to your pool removal than simple financial considerations. Information from who? Mora consulted her notebook. A neighbor reported concerns about the timing and nature of the demolition. According to this neighbor, your decision to remove the pool seemed sudden and suspicious. Suspicious how? The neighbor suggested that you might be attempting to destroy evidence related to your wife's death. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus stared at Detective Mora, his mind struggling to process what she'd just said. Evidence. What kind of evidence? Mr. Chen, I need you to tell me exactly how your wife died. Marcus felt like he was falling through space. She had cancer, pancreatic cancer. She was diagnosed in early 2023 and died in December of that year. She died at home. Yes, in hospice care. And where in the home did she spend her final days? In our bedroom, mostly. Sometimes on the couch in the living room when she wanted to be closer to the television. Did she spend any time by the pool during her illness? Marcus thought back to those final months when Sarah had been weak and frail, but still determined to enjoy whatever time she had left. Yes, actually, swimming was one of the few forms of exercise she could still manage. The pool was heated, and the water helped with her joint pain. How often would you say she used the pool? Daily, toward the end, sometimes twice a day. Mora made more notes. Was anyone else present during these swimming sessions? Usually just me, sometimes Emma. Did your wife ever swim alone? Yes, sometimes, if I was working or if Emma was at school, but I was always nearby, always listening for her. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you directly. Did your wife ever have any accidents in or around the pool? The question felt like a trap, though Marcus couldn't understand why. No, nothing serious. She was very careful. No falls. No incidents where she might have hit her head or been injured. No, absolutely not. Detective Mora closed her notebook and leaned back in her chair. Mr. Chen, I'm going to be direct. With you, we've received a report suggesting that your wife may not have died of natural causes. The report indicates that she may have suffered some kind of accident in or around your pool, and that you've now removed the pool to eliminate evidence. Of that accident, Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. That's insane. Sarah died of cancer. She was under the care of an oncologist and a hospice team. There are medical records, death certificates. We're aware of the official cause of death, but we're also obligated to investigate any allegations of potential foul play, regardless of how unlikely they may seem. Allegations from who? Karen Whitfield. Mora's expression didn't change, but Marcus could see the confirmation in her eyes. I can't discuss the identity of our sources, but I can tell you that the allegations include specific claims about inconsistencies. In your story regarding your wife's final days, what inconsistencies? According to our source, you told neighbors at the time that your wife died peacefully in her sleep. But medical records suggest she may have suffered some kind of trauma shortly before her death. Marcus felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. I don't understand. What trauma? Bruising consistent with a fall or impact injury. She was dying of cancer. She was weak and frail and falling down constantly. Of course she had bruises. Mr. Chen, please keep your voice down. Marcus realized he'd been shouting. He took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. Detective Mora, my wife, died of pancreatic cancer. She was diagnosed by Dr. James Richardson at Mayo Clinic. She underwent chemotherapy and radiation. When the treatments stopped working, we moved to hospice care with Desert Valley Hospice. Everything was documented, everything was legitimate. I'm sure it was. But we still need to investigate the claims that have been made. Claims that she fell in the pool and I covered it up. Among other things, Marcus stared at her. What other things? Maura opened her notebook again. Our source. Marcus was making coffee Monday morning when Detective Maura called. Mr. Chen, I need you to come down to the station this afternoon. We've received some additional information that requires follow-up. Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. What kind of additional information? I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Can you be here at 2 o'clock? Do I need a lawyer? That's your choice, Mr. Chen. You're not under arrest, but you have the right to legal representation if you feel you need it. The careful phrasing sent ice through Marcus's veins. I'll be there. After hanging up, Marcus stood in his kitchen, staring out at the backyard where workers were supposed to arrive soon to fill in the pool hole. Everything that had seemed so simple 3 days, a gore-move pool, save money, move forward, had become a nightmare of accusations and investigations. Dad. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed for school. Who was that? Detective Maura. She wants to meet with me this afternoon. Emma's face went pale. Did something happen? I don't know yet. Marcus forced himself to sound calm. But whatever it is, we'll handle it. Go to school, try to have a normal day. A normal day. Emma's voice cracked slightly. Dad, the police think you killed Mom. Nothing about this is normal. Marcus pulled his daughter into a hug. The police are investigating a false accusation. Once they see all the evidence, this will be over. But even as he said the words, Marcus could feel doubt gnawing at him. If Maura already had all the medical records and death certificates, what additional information could possibly require another meeting? At exactly 2 o'clock, Marcus walked into the Phoenix Police Department's downtown headquarters. Detective Maura met him in the lobby and led him through a maze of corridors to a small interview room with fluorescent lighting and no windows. Thank you for coming in, she said, settling across from him at a metal table. I wanted to update you on some developments in our investigation. What developments? Maura opened a thick file folder. We've been in contact with several people who interacted with you and your wife during her final weeks. The hospice workers, some of your neighbors, your wife's medical team, and their accounts are largely consistent with what you've told us. Your wife was clearly very ill. You were devoted to her care, and her death appears to have been from natural causes related to her cancer. Marcus felt some tension leave his shoulders. So the investigation is closed. Not exactly, Maura pulled out a series of photographs. We've also been examining these. Marcus looked at the photos and felt the world tilt. They were pictures of Sarah during her final week, some he recognized from his own phone, others that he'd never seen before. In several of them, Sarah was wearing swimsuits, and the bruising on her arms, shoulders, and torso was clearly visible. Where did you get these? Some were provided by our source. Others we found on social media accounts belonging to your neighbors. Marcus stared at the images, remembering when each one had been taken. Sarah floating in the pool, smiling despite her pain. Sarah sitting on the pool steps, exhausted but determined to enjoy the sunshine. Sarah wrapped in a towel after one of her swimming sessions, her skin marked with the telltale purple and yellow bruises that had become so common in those final months. Mr. Chen, I need you to explain the extent of this bruising. I already told you she bruised easily because of the cancer and the medications. These bruises are quite extensive, and some of them appear to be in patterns consistent with grip marks. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. Grip marks. Maura pointed to a photo of Sarah's upper arms. These marks here and here. They could be consistent with someone grabbing her forcefully, or with me helping her in and out of the pool. She was weak, Detective Maura. She couldn't always support her own weight. I had to lift her, help her move around. Sometimes I had to grip her tightly to keep her from falling. I understand. But you can see how these images might raise questions. Marcus stared at the photos, seeing his wife's final weeks through a stranger's eyes. The bruises that had seemed so normal at the time, just another side effect of her illness, now looked sinister and suspicious under the harsh fluorescent lights. Detective, my wife weighed 93 pounds when she died. She was so weak she could barely walk to the bathroom without help. The idea that I would hurt her, that I would... Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. Mr. Chen, I'm not accusing you of intentionally harming your wife, but accidents happen. Sometimes people panic, make poor decisions. If your wife fell in the pool, if she hit her head, if something went wrong, and you were afraid to call for help, nothing went wrong. She died in her bed, peacefully, with hospice workers present. Actually, that's another issue we need to discuss. Maura pulled out another document. According to the hospice records, your wife died at 3:17 a.m. on December 15th. But you didn't call to report her death until 7:45 a.m. Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath him again. She died in her sleep. I was sleeping beside her. I didn't realize she was gone until I woke up 4.5 hours later. I was exhausted. I'd been caring for her around the clock. For weeks, when she finally seemed to be sleeping peacefully, I slept too, but the hospice workers had been coming daily. Wasn't there someone scheduled to check on her that night? Marcus tried to remember those final chaotic days. The night, NURSE. She'd been coming every other night. That wasn't one of her scheduled nights. So you were alone with your wife when she died, yes? Maura made notes. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you about your wife's life insurance policy. What about it? It includes a clause that voids the policy in cases of accidental death that aren't properly reported. Marcus stared at her. Are you suggesting I didn't report my wife's death properly? I'm suggesting that if your wife died in an accidente, a fall in the pool, and you moved her body to the bedroom to make it appear she died naturally, you could have committed insurance fraud. That's insane, is it? You've told us yourself that you're in serious financial trouble. Your wife's medical bills consumed most of your savings. The insurance money was supposed to help you rebuild, but it's all gone. Maybe you needed that money so badly that you were willing to cover up the real circumstances of your wife's death. Marcus felt like he was drowning. Detective Maura, I loved my wife. I would never, ever hurt her or lie about how she died. But you did lie, didn't you? What? Maura pulled out another document. According to the death certificate, your wife died of pancreatic cancer with complications from pneumonia. But according to the medical examiner's notes, there was no evidence of pneumonia in her lungs. Marcus felt the room spinning. I don't understand. The pneumonia was listed based on your statement to the hospice workers. You told them your wife had been having trouble breathing, that you thought she might be developing an infection. She was having trouble breathing. That's common in end-stage cancer patients. But there was no actual pneumonia. I'm not a doctor. I told them what I observed, and they made the medical determination. Or you told them what you needed them to believe to support the natural death ruling. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. I want a lawyer, Mr. Chen. I want a lawyer right now. I'm not answering any more questions without legal representation. Maura nodded calmly. That's your right, but before you go, there's one more thing you should know. Marcus remained standing, his hands clenched into fists. We're getting a warrant to search your property, including excavating the area where your pool used to be. What our source has provided information suggesting that evidence related to your wife's death might be buried beneath where the pool was located. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Evidence? What evidence? I can't discuss the specifics, but the warrant should be approved by tomorrow morning. Marcus stared at Detective Maura, trying to process what she'd just told him. Someone Karen had convinced the police that he'd buried evidence under his pool. Evidence of what? His wife's death had been witnessed by hospice workers, documented by medical professionals, investigated by the medical examiner. This is insane, he said again. Maybe it is, but we still have to follow up on the allegations. What allegations? What exactly is Karen Whitfield claiming I buried under that pool? I can't discuss the details of our source's statement. She's not a source. She's a vindictive neighbor who's been harassing my family since the day my wife died. Mr. Chen, I understand you're upset. Upset? You're about to tear apart my backyard looking for evidence of a crime that never happened. And you think I'm just upset. Maura closed her file folder. I suggest you contact a lawyer immediately. And I suggest you prepare your daughter for the fact that this investigation is going to become more public. Marcus felt his blood freeze. What do you mean, more public? Search warrants are public records. The media pays attention to these things, especially when they involve allegations against suburban families. The media? I can't control what reporters choose to cover, Mr. Chen, but I'd be prepared for some attention. Marcus walked out of the police station in a daze. The sunny Phoenix afternoon felt surreal after the fluorescent-lit interrogation room, and the normal sounds of traffic and conversation seemed to come from another world. He sat, Lazy Sunday afternoons, all of it about to become rubble and memories. But Karen Whitfield stood at her fence, phone pressed to her ear, her voice carrying across the yard. "Yes, officer, he's destroying community property. It's a public safety hazard." Marcus's grip tightened on the hammer. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed, because what Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this pool held a secret worth killing for. And in 20 minutes, when the first sledgehammer blow cracked the concrete, that secret would surface like a corpse in still water. The demolition crew was supposed to arrive at 8 in the morning, but Marcus Chen had been awake since 5, standing barefoot on his back deck with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The pool stretched before him like a perfect rectangle of liquid sapphire, catching the early morning light and throwing it back in ripples that danced across the concrete deck. $30,000. That's what the pool had cost him 3 years ago, back when Sarah was still alive and Emma was 12 and complained about being the only kid in 7th grade without a pool. Emma was 15 and spent most of her time locked in her room, emerging only to remind him how much she hated their new downsized life. The consulting contracts had dried up after Sarah's medical bills consumed their savings. The monthly maintenance alone was eating into their grocery budget. "Dad?" Emma's voice drifted through the sliding glass door. "They're here." Marcus turned to see a white pickup truck pulling into his driveway, Desert Demolition painted in bold letters on the side. Behind it, a smaller truck carrying what looked like industrial-sized and concrete saws. His stomach clenched. "I'll be right in," he called back, but Emma had already disappeared. She'd made her feelings about the pool removal crystal clear. It was, in her words, just another way you're ruining everything that made Mom happy. The words had cut deeper than she'd probably intended, but before he could reach the front door, his doorbell rang. Through the peephole, he saw his next-door neighbor, Karen Whitfield. Standing on his porch with her arms crossed and her mouth set in that familiar line of disapproval he'd come to know so well over the past year. He opened the door. Instead, she gestured toward the demolition trucks. "I need to speak with you about this ... situation. The pool removal." "What about it?" Karen's perfectly manicured nails drummed against her forearm. At 52, she was the kind of woman who treated the Homeowners Association like her personal kingdom and viewed any deviation from suburban perfection as a personal affront. And she wore the sort of athletic wear that had never seen actual athletics. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "Karen, I've already cleared this with the HOA. The permits are approved. The city inspector signed off on everything." "That's not the issue." She opened the folder and pulled out a printed page covered in highlighted text. Section 14.7 of the Community Standards clearly states that any major safety committee. The pool is on my property, but the demolition debris could affect the groundwater. The noise will disturb the peace of the neighborhood. And frankly, Marcus, an empty hole where a pool used to be, is going to be an eyesore that brings down all our property values. Behind Karen, Marcus could see the demolition crew supervisor walking up his driveway, clipboard in hand. "Look," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice level. "I understand your concerns, but I can't afford to maintain the pool anymore." Something flickered across Karen's face. Not sympathy exactly, but something that might have been recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual mask of suburban authority. "That's unfortunate, but your financial situation doesn't supersede community standards. I've already paid them. I can't just then. Perhaps you should have thought of that before rushing into this decision." The approaching supervisor, "Excuse me, are you in charge of this demolition?" The supervisor, whose name tag read Miguel Santos, nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Miguel Santos, Desert Demolition. We're here to remove the in-ground pool for Mr. Chen. I need to inform you that this demolition has not been properly approved according to our community bylaws. I'm going to have to ask you to cease any work until we can hold a proper review." Miguel looked from Karen to Marcus, clearly confused. "Sir, is this correct? Because I've got your signed contract and your city permits right here." Marcus felt heat rising in his chest. "The permits are valid, Miguel. This is a community dispute, not a legal issue, and until it's resolved, I cannot in good conscience allow this demolition to proceed. You can't in good conscience." The words came out sharper than Marcus intended. "Karen, this is my property, my pool, my decision. Your decision. That affects the entire neighborhood." Her voice was rising now, and Marcus noticed a few neighbors starting to emerge from their houses, drawn by the commotion. "I won't stand by and watch you create a hazard that could endanger our children." Endanger children? It's removing a pool, not building a nuclear reactor. Marcus stepped closer to Karen, close enough that he could smell her expensive perfume. "I'm done with this conversation. Miguel, please proceed with the work." "Sir," Miguel said carefully, "if there's a community dispute, maybe we should." "There's no dispute. There's a woman who thinks she can control what happens on other people's property." Marcus looked directly at Karen. "You want to call a committee? Meeting? Fine, call it. But you're not stopping this demolition." Karen's face flushed red. "We'll see about that." She pulled out her phone and began dialing. "Yes, hello. This is Karen Whitfield from Sunset Ridge. I need to report a public endangerment. Situation, ... Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "Are you seriously calling the police?" Karen, hang up the phone. Double quotes, ... The address is 4247 Desert Rose Drive, ... Miguel cleared his throat. "Look, folks, maybe I should come. Back when you've sorted this out." "No." Marcus's voice was steel. "You're not coming back. We're doing this now." He turned to Karen, who was still on the phone with what he assumed was 911. "You want to play games? Fine, but I'm not backing down." Karen finished her call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. "The police are on their way. They'll determine whether this demolition can proceed safely. Perfect. And when they tell you that I have every legal right to remove a pool from my own property, maybe you'll finally back off. We'll see." The standoff stretched between them, Marcus and Karen, facing each other like gunfighters in some suburban western. Miguel and his crew stood awkwardly by their trucks, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, some still in bathrobes and slippers, all of them watching the drama unfold. Marcus recognized most of them. Betty Rodriguez from across the street, who always brought cookies when someone in the neighborhood was sick. Tom and Janet Mueller from 2 houses down, who'd helped him install the pool 3 years ago. All of them watching his life fall apart in public. "Dad?" Emma appeared beside him, having slipped out through the garage. "What's going on?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Just a misunderstanding." Emma looked at the demolition trucks, then at Karen, then at the growing crowd. Of neighbors? Are they not taking down the pool? Marcus could see the hope in his daughter's eyes, hope that maybe, somehow, they could keep this last piece of their old life intact. But he could also see the practical reality: they couldn't afford the pool. They couldn't afford much of anything anymore. "They're taking it down," he said quietly. Emma's face crumpled. "But I heard Mrs. Whitfield saying—" "Mrs. Whitfield is concerned about community standards," Marcus said, his voice carefully controlled. "But this is our decision to make." "No, it's not." Karen's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "When your decisions affect the safe